Dark Souls, or more specifically, the entire Soulsborne series, is famous for its combat, relentless nature, and difficulty. But this certain type of combat has not prevented other publishers from trying their own versions of the genre, creating the Soulsborne game's distant cousin, Souls-likes. Another Crab's Treasure does not shy away from the combat system presented by its category. In terms of defense, Another Crab's Treasure, or ACT for short, has the standard Souls-like dodge roll mechanic, blocking, parrying, and of course, running. In terms of offense, you're given a fork at the start of the game, a basic hack and slash type weapon with light attacks and a charged attack. Sadly, the fork is the only available melee weapon in the game, but with a certain upgrade, you can change the moveset, making it hit harder but attack slower at the expense of a shell, which I'll cover later on in the video. But the fork is certainly not the only way to inflict damage upon your enemies. Adaptations and shell spells are the two other ways of doing damage, although adaptations do considerably more damage than shell spells, and shell spells don't have many offensive abilities. Adaptations are unique abilities that you obtain primarily from killing bosses. Some are good for combat, locking down the opponent providing more opportunities for damage, and some are needed to progress into new areas. Adaptations are also upgradable, but only after you beat a certain boss. Skills are another way of increasing damage output, unlocked early on in the game and upgradable by collecting umami crystals around the map. Umami crystals are also how you upgrade your adaptations. The main combat skills under the Way of the Predator section of the skill tree is primarily how you increase damage, whether it be attaching shells to your fork for more damage, or providing a devastating blow after capsizing your target enemy. Capsizing is a way of creating even more damage output by parrying and attacking an enemy enough times to knock them over. The primary way to ease the burden of capsizing enemies is through stowaways, but you can only utilize stowaways when you have a shell equipped. Another Crab's Treasure falls into a very known category with lots of different games to compete with. So how does Another Crab's Treasure set itself apart from other Souls-likes? Shells. Without shells, you take a lot more damage and you cannot utilize stowaways. You can't block, parry, or roll around. Each shell is unique, with almost every shell having a different ability assigned to it. Some may launch projectiles at your target, and others may turn you into a drunken god, giving you the power to do massive damage. There are 69, different shells to unlock, including the gun, which is only obtainable through the settings. Some shells are pretty basic, and others are quite reminiscent of other popular games out there. Shells are the ultimate defense in ACT. Without them, you're pretty much screwed. But with the right shell and the right stowaways, you can negate damage entirely, but only for as long as your shell lasts. The ability to negate health damage, as opposed to shell damage, which I'll talk about in a second, is entirely up to your defense stat. The amount of defense you have equates to the amount of damage you negate. If you have 25 defense, then you negate 25% of damage from all sources. If you have 100 defense, then you negate all damage entirely until your shell breaks. Defense is influenced by the defense stat on your shell and the additional defense granted by stowaways. Utilizing barnacles in conjunction with high defense shells is a known method of becoming invincible. But if your shell breaks, then so do you. So how do you prevent your shell from breaking as much as possible? Each shell has their respective amount of durability, which can be seen in the pause menu. With a certain skill, you can repair damage your shell takes by dealing damage yourself, but you cannot recover 100% of the damage you deal. One way of reducing the damage your shell takes is through your resistance stat. For each level you have in resistance, including additional stat increases from stowaways, reduces the damage your shell takes when getting hit. If you have 15 resistance, then your shell takes 15 less damage from each hit. But the breaking of your shell is inevitable. So what happens when you lose your beloved red solo cup? Introducing Shell Insurance, a way of guaranteeing that you hold on to your shell forever even after it gets annihilated by some unblockable attack that I know you couldn't dodge. After you progress past the first main dungeon of the game, you'll find your way into the hub of ACT. Here, you can do many things like sell junk, buy different stowaways, and most importantly, ensure the survival of your shells. By purchasing Shell Insurance, whenever you visit a moon snail shell, which is this game's equivalent of a site of grace, You gain that shell back, even if you didn't have it when entering the snail shell. But each shell's importance to the protagonist pales in comparison to the one shell the entire game is based around. The story in Another Crab's Treasure is entirely based around the protagonist reclaiming his long-lost shell, home, after he got evicted by his landlord because of tax evasion. It's a simple concept, but the journey is anything but. Just like how God of War 2018 had a simple goal for Kratos and Atreus to scatter Faye's ashes across the highest peak in all the realms. But it's not just the story that provides the game's setting. In Another Crab's Treasure, if the environment is not made out of sand, rock, or coral, then it's made up of some kind of junk that was tossed into the ocean. From styrofoam, to cardboard, to glass bottles being used as weapons by some of your enemies, and boy, do they hurt. Some enemies even combine simple wooden hammers with things like chewed gum to give their attacks some individuality to them. Another Crab's Treasure isn't afraid of using man-made objects for platforming, points of interest, and progressing the story. Everywhere you go, you're either swinging from fish hook to fish hook, climbing nets, or getting yanked around by magnets that are unexplainably still working. Even some platforming sections are unavailable until after you progress the story to a certain point. So always go back and check early areas because there are some very nice toys that I know you missed. And lastly, the game's music is so unique to the point of the soundtrack itself making you feel like you're underwater. You can find most of the OST is sort of muffled, in the same way that in real life, sound underwater is a bit distorted. Even the game's only song with any lyrics provides clever play on words, utilizing phrases like rubbing alcohol to reinforce the trashy theme that is present throughout the game. Overall, the game is a blast. I fell in love with it so quickly that the ending credits song almost made me burst into tears at how good the game was. So good that it challenged me to create this documentary type video that I've never made before. Stay safe, thanks for watching, and God bless you all.
When we first met, I'd hoped you might clean up the mess I made, and with some time and rubbing alcohol, the stains on me might fade. But nothing ever washes out the way you want it to, my dear. No, nothing ever seems to disappear.